what's up, everyone? We are your internet historians, and in today's episode, we will be discussing the history behind the movie On the Basis of Sex, not starring, but it's based on Ruth Bader Ginsburg's life. So in the synopsis, On the Basis of Sex, Ruth Bader Ginsburg is a struggling attorney and new mother who faces adversity and numerous obstacles in her fight for equal rights. When Ruth takes on a groundbreaking tax case with her husband, attorney Martin Ginsburg, she knows it could change the direction of her career and the way the courts view gender discrimination. So, what were your guys' thoughts on the movie?
I liked the movie.
I liked it a lot.
Yeah, same.
I feel like we always say that. We're always just like, oh, we love the movie.
Well, I mean, there were some. I didn't like Bohemian Rhapsody that much.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
But this one I liked because it was like genuinely like entertaining. Like the whole movie was entertaining. There weren't any parts where I like looked at my phone or like sometimes I do that, when you're watching a film, you kind of will look down, whatever, to see what's going on on the social media.
I did that in the beginning. I think I like had it on when I was cleaning my house. And then the first half and then the second half I was like, ooh, what's happening?
Yeah, it was just entertaining, I feel like, and it kind of almost made me forget that it was based on a real person's life just because of, I guess, the entertainment value of it. It was just seemed like, a regular drama movie.
Yeah.
And it was very inspirational.
It was
definitely.
Inspirational.
Yeah. The very end, when when she's walking up the steps, you're like,
and it's really her. Yeah. That was cool.
I was like, oh, my heart. I was like, she looks so cute.
Yeah.
Her little blue suit.
Yeah. She's so tiny. Like I didn't realize how small she was.
Right? Yeah, they said something about that in the movie.
About her height?
Yeah. Do you remember?
Not really, but I mean, I'm sure.
I remember in real life they said something about it because she met Armie Hammer, who plays her husband, and she said, "You're much taller than Marty was," and then he said, "Well, you're much shorter than Felicity Jones is."
Yeah, she was really small.
Yeah, no, there was like a line in the movie, something like, "I have to." Maybe something about standing out or something like that, and he's like, well, it's a good thing that you're really short,
I think I do remember that. Yeah. No, and I also
she said, "Get down here," and I was like,
yeah. Come down here. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I think that was in the beginning, right?
Yeah,
I remember that. But I also liked the film because it did seem educational too. Because, like I said, I think in the last episode, I had never really heard anything about her. I know that sounds like really bad, but like I never looked into her or anything like that. Maybe because she's was still alive, so I never really cared to. I know, again, that sounds terrible, but I was just like, whatever. And then so after watching the film, I was like, oh, like that's actually pretty cool. Like everything that she did and how she kind of fought for her recognition in the legal world and all that stuff. So.
I mean, she changed so much. We wouldn't have the opportunities that we do today.
Yeah, I feel like, I like watching it, I was just like, she did so much and changed so much. It's like unfortunate that we didn't learn about it in school. Yeah. And I feel like the only real way you would ever learn about it in school is like if you were, going into that field or like gender studies or something like that. Because it's just like, I feel like people should know like everything that she did.
Totally. Yeah, exactly. Because I was like, dang, because I remember when I was younger, I think it was briefly like they mentioned her.
No, I never heard of her.
But yeah, exactly. Like I never cared to actually look into her as a person, see what she did for the world. And even when she passed, that was like the first time I actually saw people post things of what she did for, America, women, all the stuff, all the laws that she helped pass or,
I think it's because when you're a child and growing up, you don't think about how things became how they are now. You're just like, this is my life now. This is how I'm going to, I think for anybody, you're always looking forward. You don't really look too much behind and figure out how everything has gone to where it is now, which is why probably we didn't look into Ruth or anything like that and know anything about her until we had to actually look her up. Anyways, it's unfortunate. I do think, for sure, we should have learned about her in high school. Like when I think about how women were kind of more oppressed back then, I feel like I think of it as if it was like 100 years ago,
Yeah.
So that's why you don't think that there's somebody who was still living when, I don't know how to say this, but, she was still alive, still fighting for this. And she experienced all of that in her lifetime.
Yeah.
And so that's something that I was like I shouldn't have been shocked about, but I was.
Totally. First thing we're going to be talking about is her relationship with Marty. In the film, he was very much I don't know, he definitely added something to the movie as well as being like that supportive husband for her. And I think normally we're not used to seeing that type of figure in films.
Or in real life.
Yeah. And I mean, that's true. He was obviously very supportive of her, and I was again curious to see how the film reflected their relationship in real life and if it was true or not. And it pretty much was true, like exactly like that's how he was as a husband. And I did want to mention that when the screenwriter Daniel Stiepelman was writing the script, people were telling him that Marty's character wasn't believable and that he should change it, but he didn't change it, obviously. And I think that was for the best for the film.
Yeah,
I think
they were trying to say to like
Side note,
what?
I probably should have prefaced this or whatever, but side note, the person who wrote this is Ruth's nephew.
Mm-hmm.
So he knew all of these people personally.
Yeah, exactly. And I think I even saw in one of the article, I'm not sure if you guys saw it, but that basically the film was just as much as of a like, I guess, love note to his uncle as it was to his aunt Ruth, which I thought was, yeah, again, I think it's important also just because he already passed away. So I think it's important to preserve his memory in the way that you remember him. And I think it would have probably felt wrong to him to create a character that wasn't representative of his uncle as he actually was. So I'm glad he didn't change it.
What did they say? What did they want him to be?
I think the way people would think of him and maybe not being as supportive of the husband,
kind of for the time period.
Yeah, and I think it's just to ante up like the drama
of
like the film
drama.
To see and just to kind of put her up against another obstacle. But I think it was again a good idea for him just to keep it, because I think it's important to show in the fight for equality that you can have men that are supportive of their wives and all of that. So they first met while both attending Cornell, having been set up on a blind date by one of Marty's roommates. Ruth said that Marty was the only young man she dated who cared that she had a brain. And then after they graduated from Cornell, they got married, and it was in 1954 when they got married, and they moved to Fort Still, Oklahoma shortly after. And we see in the film that Marty seems to be in the kitchen a lot, and that was because he had to take over the cooking in the home because Ruth was terrible at cooking, and her children kicked her out of the kitchen, essentially. And they don't actually mention that a lot in the film, but you just see him in the kitchen a lot in the film. Like he's always wearing an apron.
In the very
they only
beginning,
say it once. Yeah.
In the very beginning of the film, I remember she was like, "You haven't touched your tuna casserole." She's like, "I put onions in it. It's better, right?"
Yeah, I do remember that now. Yeah.
And he eats the kids' cereal instead.
But I don't know. I just think that's a cool representation too of men being able to cook and being able to take over that responsibility in the household. Because I mean, even in my household, even though I do the majority of the cooking, I feel like my husband is the better cook out of us too, but he just doesn't do it as often because I'm usually home first. So I just, get it ready for us. But yeah, he also loved to cook. And after he passed away, there was a cookbook published in his honor.
I think Ruth also said when she watched the movie, she was like, "Oh yeah," and the part where Andy was like cutting in the kitchen, she's like, "Oh, that was totally Marty in the kitchen cutting vegetables away, like it was natural to him and everything like that."
And also another thing too, I noticed when I was looking at pictures of Marty and Ruth that a lot of the times in the pictures he was also wearing an apron around his waist, and I don't know, just seemed very I guess similar to the film, or they were reflecting each other, because I feel like a lot in the film too, you were always seeing him with an apron on, or they were always in the kitchen.
When her nephew approached her to make this movie, it was about a year after his death, I believe. Like, he came up with the idea for the movie at his uncle's funeral, but obviously felt that was too soon. And so when he approached her to write the movie, she pretty much gave him complete free reign, and her only things that she said was, you need to get the law right and you need to get Marty right. And that's pretty much all she cared about.
But yeah, they also split home life responsibilities. I guess when one had something going on in their lives, career-wise, we see in the film too, Marty gets a job and Ruth also has a job at some point, but whenever one of them had something going on, the other one would kind of pick up those home life responsibilities. So if Marty was at work kind of a thing, then Ruth would go ahead and take care of the kids, pick them up, take care of all that type of stuff, and vice versa. If Ruth had something going on, then Marty would be the one to step in and do that, which I mean, makes sense for a family, but obviously, especially in that time frame, yeah, exactly. It was known for women to be the ones to kind of take up those responsibilities. And I don't know, I think that's really cool, especially for those times, just how good their relationship was. It's like kind of, I don't know, like I feel like Marty needs to have his own movie and see how he grew up, because it's like, I don't know, it's like, especially for that time, how did he turn out to be such a like cool dude? But I mean, like, I don't know, obviously it has something to do with like his upbringing, and maybe he just had like a really great respect for Ruth and wanted her to succeed, so he was willing to also do that. But I think he was known for kind of just being a all around stand-up dude and had like a pretty good humor and stuff like that. So in 1990, when Ruth's name was up for the Supreme Court, Marty campaigned hard for her seat, and many people, including Ruth, said that if it wasn't for him, that she probably wouldn't have gotten her seat. So I think that's just, again, really cool of Marty to help his wife out in that way. I don't know, it's just heartwarming.
He was like the campaign manager or whatever.
Yeah, he was just fighting hard. It's probably, doing campaigning, walking. I don't know how they did it back in the day, but I'm thinking of like canvassing and phone calls and shit like that, or like probably like fundraisers and stuff like that. So he was very much into doing all that. And I mean, I feel like anyone would do that for their wife, or like for their significant other, but clearly, it's usually role reversal. Usually it's the women doing that for the men. So it's just cool seeing that like her success wasn't putting like some type of weird relationship, because you know how sometimes people, if one's more successful than the other, especially if it's a man, their like ego gets kind of hurt for some reason.
In like celebrity marriages, like that happens. They say that all the time when there's like a couple that gets divorced and like the female is getting more successful than them. Okay, I'll just tell who I'm talking about, who I'm thinking of. When Scarlett Johansson and Ryan Reynolds were married and they got a divorce and everything, supposedly they got a divorce because Scarlett's career was skyrocketing and Ryan's was kind of just stagnant, and supposedly that was what caused like a disturbance in their relationship. So
stupid.
I don't know that for sure, but like they're just one example of many in like celebrities who have gotten whose marriages have ended, and there's been tons of times that they have said it's because like the lady's career has skyrocketed and the dude can handle it.
So in 2010, that's when Marty died of cancer. We also, we see that in the film that he had testicular cancer, right?
He did, but then it was another cancer, wasn't
it? That he ultimately died from? Oh, I assume that it just,
I don't know.
Is that different? Mesticular versus testicular?
Probably. Either way, he died in 2010 of cancer. And so when Ruth went to the hospital to make arrangements, she found a note written by Marty. And it said, I'll read it to you guys. It said, "My dearest Ruth, you are the only person I have loved in my life, setting aside a bit parents and kids and their kids, and I have admired and loved you almost since the day we first met at Cornell some 56 years ago. What a treat it has been to watch you progress to the very top of the legal world. I will be in JH Medical Center until Friday, June 25th, I believe, and between then and now, I shall think of hard on my remaining health and life, and whether on balance the time has come for me to tough it out or to take leave of life, because the loss of quality now simply overwhelms. I hope you will support where I come out, but I understand you may not. I will not love you a jot less, Marty." I know, like, that's so sad. Like, I mean, obviously knew he was coming to his end, but even in his final moments, he's still thinking of his wife and how much he loves her. And I was like,
did you have how old he was when he passed away?
Ooh, no.
He was 78.
78?
Yeah.
Still pretty young.
Yeah, compared to her.
Oh, well, yeah.
I also read that they were so equal in their relationship that because they got married right after Cornell, or she graduated from Cornell. Yeah. And I guess like even when it came to like what they wanted to do with their careers, they decided that together, and that's why they both went to law school together.
And that's really cool too, that they always had a relationship that seemed they were, built on communication and discussing their life together and making those decisions together. Because even in the film, you see how he's like, how I think it was in New York that he got his job.
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, I don't want to separate the family. And so they're just basically figuring out a way for it to make it work to where she can also go there with him. And I just think that's cool that, I don't know, they were doing those decisions together, because normally it's like one person does something and the other one just follows because they have to.
Do you think it's because they're lawyers? They know how to like communicate and
Probably. I think they're just two really smart people.
Yeah,
they just like know how to communicate.
I think they just really have a respect for each other, and I think that has to do with the why they were willing to kind of work things out in that way.
Yeah.
Because in the film too, it just picks up right when they're already having their daughter. So there's a lot of their lives we didn't see, so we don't know, if it was always that way or.
Yeah, I'm sure it wasn't always rainbows and butterflies.
Yeah, I'm sure they had their moments, but I mean, that's every relationship, I feel. But I think overall, they had a very happy marriage and,
mutual respect for each other.
Want to get into her early life, Lisa?
Yes. All right. So Joan Ruth Bader was born on March 15th, 1933 in Brooklyn, New York City. She was the second daughter to Cecilia and Nathan Bader. Nathan was a Jewish immigrant from the Ukraine, and her mother was born in New York, but her grandparents were from Poland. Ruth's older sister died from meningitis at the age of 6, and Ruth was only 14 months old. So Ruth was nicknamed Kiki by her older sister Marilyn for being like a Kiki baby. So that makes sense, because in the movie, did you guys hear like sometimes her husband calls her Kiki? There's a couple people who call her Kiki. So I was wondering that. I was like, well, what is this Kiki?
What the hell's a Kiki baby?
She's kicky. She kicks a lot.
Oh, okay. I was like, what the hell is that?
I meant a Kiki baby.
Okay.
Nicknamed her Kiki. It's like Miley Cyrus, how she was a smiley baby, and they call her Miley. Yeah, her real name's Destiny. So weird. So Ruth started school. Her mother discovered that several other girls were named Joan and suggested the teacher start calling her Ruth to avoid confusion. So that's why we call her Ruth and not Joan. So the family weren't devout Jewish people, but they did belong to a Jewish center. Ruth learned the Jewish faith, and she also gained a familiarity to the Hebrew language. She did attend Jewish summer camps and later became a camp counselor until she at the age of 18. Ruth's mother took an active role in her education and would often take her to the library. Her mother was a good student and even graduated high school at the age of 15. So yeah, she got it from DNA, guys. Her mother, though, could not continue her education because the family chose to send her brother to college instead. Boo. Ruth's mother did not want the same thing for her daughter and wanted Ruth to get more education. And she kind of wanted Ruth to become a history high school teacher. Ruth's mother struggled with cancer throughout Ruth's high school years and died the day before Ruth's high school graduation. That is super sad. I don't know how I could deal with that if I was Ruth. So that was mostly like her early life, her life at Harvard. So in the fall of 1956, Ruth enrolled at the Harvard Law School, where she was one of 9 women in the class of about 500 men. So there was that scene in the movie where the dean of Harvard Law invites all the women to have dinner at his home, and then he later asks the female students, "Why are you at Harvard Law taking a place of a man?" I kind of figured that was true, but I just want to confirm that actually happened.
That's kind of messed up that he invited them to a dinner just to ask them. Like, do you think like that dinner was going to be like, oh my God, welcome everybody to this program. Like, congrats on being the first woman. But instead he's like, nah, why'd you guys take a place of a man?
I know. Yeah. And we're like, I'm just here for the soup.
I like her response though, when in the movie at least.
Yeah, the sarcasm.
I'm like, I knew that was I knew that was coming, but I was like, yes, get him.
So while she was a student at Harvard Law, she was an outstanding student and an editor of the Harvard Law Review. And as we know, she was also a young mom to her baby girl, Jane. While she was there, Martin was diagnosed with testicular cancer. So I'm going to do a quick timeline. Ruth and Martin were married in 1954. Ruth gave birth to their daughter, Jane, in 1955. She began at Harvard Law in 1956, and Martin was diagnosed with testicular cancer in 1957. So it hasn't even been like 5 years yet. It's very eventful. So because all of this required him to have a number of surgeries and radiation therapy. During that time, Ruth attended class, took notes for both of them, typed her husband's dictated papers, cared for their daughter and her sick husband, all while making the Harvard Law Review. She has said that after a day of her own classes, receiving notes for Martin's from his peers, preparing dinner for the family, caring for his sick Marty, and typing his senior paper while he dictates them, she would return to her own coursework around 2 a.m. She remained...
When does she sleep is my question.
No, I know.
Never.
That's what, when I was seeing that, I was like, dude, when the hell did you even have time to sleep? Because I mean, I'm assuming her classes started pretty early too,
Yeah.
right? Like,
and she was in classes like all day. So she remained at the top of her class at Harvard, and she said that she rarely got more than 3 hours of sleep at night. Basically,
That's
she's
crazy.
a badass. I was curious on like how they were paying for everything. I didn't look that up. But you know, if she's in class all day, he's sick. I won't say all day, but probably all day and getting, you know, therapy and stuff like that. I mean, I don't know. I'm curious like how they were able to like pay for childcare for Jane while she's in class. Like that was the thing I was kind of curious about.
I didn't even think to look that up.
I mean, it was the 50s, right? Who knows how they I mean, maybe they were even on welfare, right? Or food stamps, whatever. Difficulty finding a job. So in 1959, she earned her law degree at Columbia and tied for first in her class. At the start of her legal career, Ruth encountered difficulty in finding employment. In 1960, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, 1 in 3 married women worked outside of the home. The same year, the Supreme Court Justice Felix Frankfurter rejected Ruth for a clerkship position due to her gender. She was rejected even though she had a strong recommendation from Albert Martin Sachs, who was a professor at Harvard Law School, and then Columbia law professor Gerard Gunther also pushed for Judge Edmund L. Palmieri for the U.S. District Court for the Southern District of New York to hire Ruth as a law clerk, threatening to never recommend another Columbia student to Edmund if he did not give Ruth the opportunity and guaranteeing to provide the judge with a replacement clerk should Ruth not succeed. So later that year, Ruth began her clerkship for the judge, and she held that position for 2 years, but not practiced law directly. So that really sucks that she had to experience that gender discrimination. I know that it is still kind of talked about to this day. We kind of talked about it briefly when we talked about 42, how even in our resumes, just they could easily look at your name and kind of judge you by that and whether they want to hire you or not, you know?
Yeah.
They say they don't.
And it's kind of crazy too to think about it that wasn't that long ago when people were able to not hire you based on your gender. And even in the film, I forget which place she was at, if it was one of these that were mentioned, but how she was talking to that guy, she was doing an interview basically, and he's like, well, some of the wives might get like jealous if we hire you. And I'm like, you could not do that today.
No, not at all. I don't hear about it a lot, but it is something that sometimes me and my friends talk about is if you're like pregnant and looking for a job, you know, that could really sabotage your, you know, interviewing process. I mean, it's not like you have to disclose that, but it is something that people kind of do judge.
Yeah, speaking on that, when she does what you'll mention, when she takes the job to be the professor, she has to hide that she got pregnant with her second child wearing baggy clothing because she didn't have tenure at that point.
Mm-hmm.
So she had to hide it until she got the contract to stay on as a professor.
Yeah, it's things like that. That's super crazy. And they're also like, oh, well, you know, I don't want to hire you because you have so much responsibilities at home. And it's like, hey, I also have a husband. So in 1963, Ruth's first position as professor at Rutgers Law School. So she started there as a professor. There were drawbacks. Ruth was told that she would be paid less than her male colleagues because she had a husband with a well-paid job. When she got the job, she was one of the fewer than 20 female law professors in the U.S. She was a professor of law, mainly civil procedure. She was at Rutgers from 1963 to 1972. She received tenure from the school in 1969. Was a professor until 1972.
Yeah, I hated that they said they were going to pay her less because her husband has a good job. I'm like, pay me what I'm worth.
I know. I have this joke with whenever a guy complains, like, when you go to Vegas, it's kind of more catered to the ladies, right? So sometimes a lot of girls can get kind of discounts or talk to a promoter and get into places for free. And there was a guy complaining about that. And I was like, would you say that you'd want equal pay? He's like, oh, Lisa. But yeah, like every time I hear a guy kind of make those type of complaints, I'm like, would you I've even heard this from guys who talk about like sugar babies and stuff like that. Like they say, oh, the opportunity to be a sugar baby as a male is more difficult, or you don't get paid as much. And even there, I'm like, would you say you'd like to get equal pay? Like same with porn. I can't listen to you complain about this.
Yeah, no, exactly.
A man complain about that when women aren't getting equal pay in other areas.
But that's even like an argument to say, like, if men are like, oh, we're not being treated the same. So I'm like, so you agree? You think that, like, whatever,
Regina
like,
George. So you agree?
Let's get into talking about the case that was the main case in the film, Moritz versus Commissioner. Yeah, I guess when I also watched the film, I didn't think it was going to be specifically one case that they were going to talk about. I guess I didn't know what. But, I mean, I think it's a cool case that they kind of used to portray the whole thing because, sorry, I'm like
it was like the catalyst, really.
Yeah, and I also enjoyed the fact that they, not, I guess, in the sense of the case, it doesn't really make sense how I was thinking. But, like, in my head, I was like, oh, I like that they used a male to show other men that, hey, this isn't the right way for women.
It was the only way. It was the only way to get through. It's crazy.
Yeah, but I mean, even though like I totally agree with what they were fighting for that dude, I was just like, that's cool. That I think it was important that they had to use a dude to show other dudes, hey, it's not right.
That is how she started out, though, right? Like she actually took on a lot of cases where there was discrimination against men. I believe it wasn't just. I mean, she did pave a path for like gender discrimination, but I think didn't she start paving that with
and I think because
being discriminated
and I think they say it in the film too. It's like they see it as a way to open, like if they solve this case for this dude, it's going to open up another door, so now they can fight for other things for women because it leads into that. But anyways, go ahead and get into it, Alec.
So the main case that they portray in the movie is the Moritz v. Commissioner of Internal Revenue. And technically this wasn't her first case that she's ever taken on because, as you know, she couldn't find a job, so she never really got to be in the court. She did actually, which they mentioned very briefly, there was Reed v. Reed. I always want to say versus v. Reed.
That's how I say it.
Sorry,
versus. I mean, that's how they write it.
But they always say V. They say V out loud. It's weird. Which she wrote the briefing for, and there is that scene where she meets with the lawyer who's going to be doing the case, and Melvin Wolf introduces them and saying, "Oh, I want you to write the brief for this. Help him write the brief for this case, but he's going to argue it in the Supreme Court." And ultimately, they don't really show really what happens with that case, really, but in the real world. I guess the lawyer that they showed in the movie, Durs, I think his name was, he argued it like so poorly that the only thing that saved the case is what Ruth wrote in the briefing. Because he was just not.
He looked like a little, I don't know how they presented him on the screen. I was like, that guy is like, you can tell he was kind of gonna be shaky or something. I don't know. He just didn't seem like a strong persona, I guess, in the film, how they portrayed him.
Yeah. So her first like real big case was the Moritz v. Commissioner of Internal Revenue, which both her and Marty argued together, which is cool. So Marty, he brought the case to her attention after stumbling upon it himself in a weekly publication of tax court rulings because he was a tax lawyer at the time, or when he was working in New York. Charles Moritz, was a traveling salesman who hired a nurse to help care for his elderly mother when he was away. He knew that there was a tax deduction for the expense, but discovered that as a bachelor, he, unlike a woman, a widower, or a divorcee, was ineligible. In other words, by refusing to acknowledge and accommodate the possibility of an unmarried man as a caregiver, Section 214 of the tax code constituted sex-based discrimination. So, because at the time, they couldn't even imagine a man wanting to take care of his mom. Like, what the heck? What's wrong with this guy? He's a weirdo.
Or be a bachelor and never get married.
Exactly. Yeah. So as soon as it's pretty much how it happened in the movie. As soon as Ruth read that read that case, she was like, we have to take it on because she knew that this was the only way, like you said, to get in there and be like, this could be, the turning point. Really, it's like I can show them, you know, using a man as an example that this is wrong because they're never going to see it from the other side. So while the legal side of Moritz's case is accurate, Ruth didn't actually fly to Denver to meet with Charles. Marty actually made first contact. Not that they met face to face, but he's the one who reached out. According to Ruth herself, they met with Charles for the first time in the fall of 1971, the night before the argument. He took them to dinner in Denver and had to hire a babysitter for his mom. So I have a lot of like I looked. I mean, the case is interesting, obviously, but I was more interested in how they portrayed the case in the movie versus how it really happened. So I was a lot of fact versus fiction findings.
Yeah.
So even the preparation for the case was different than they portrayed. The other side arguing against Ruth, Jim Bozarth, he actually never returned to the Pentagon to help them compile Appendix E, which is, you see them, all the women sitting around the table going through each, I guess they're not, I guess they're laws, I guess. They're all, sex-based laws. Though it was another member of the Department of Justice team that did reach out to the Pentagon to pull all of these codes. And but that whole Appendix E, I don't know, Appendix E, that didn't even come until after their court date in Denver, which I thought was interesting. So they have her former dean of Harvard, Erwin Griswold or whatever. He's a jerk. He's portrayed as a jerk. Yeah. Apparently he really was a jerk.
Well, I mean, if he asked that freaking question.
Yeah, so yeah, but you always want to have like a villain, but I guess this guy just wasn't great. But he now is a U.S. Solicitor General. Now he's not dean anymore.
He's still alive.
No. Sorry, at the time. No, at the time, yeah.
Of this case. Okay. I thought you meant now. I was like, oh my God, he was pretty old in the how they portrayed him in the film.
Yeah, no, okay. I don't think so. But yeah, so after her court date in Denver, that's when they pulled all of these findings to reverse the decision. He attached that giant stack to his appeal to reverse. But okay, so yeah, so speaking on this appendix, according to her biographer, it was a monumental accomplishment because there was no computers in law offices at the time. The only way the Solicitor General could have generated his list, the Ginsburgs concluded, was by using computers at the Department of Defense, which is kind of crazy to think about, that it's just like no one has computers. So you literally have to go to the Pentagon to pull this information. Like, that's crazy. That's up there. So when preparing for the case, there was no moot court or mock trial like they held in the movie, where they had everybody yelling at Ruth pretty much. And she never lost her cool and started. I mean, obviously Melvin, friend Melvin, is very much portrayed as like an agitator. But I mean, he's right. But yeah, which he actually kind of was that for her. They knew. I mean, they had a good understanding of each other. Like, they had a good partnership, her and Melvin, but he very much was it like the devil's advocate, kind of like he could always see the other side to try to prepare Ruth.
Well, she never, because he was in multiple, like, he'd done actual trials and cases and stuff like that before, and she hadn't. So I think he, like you said, you pretty much already said, he kind of was just preparing her for like, hey, this is what they're probably going to say. Because I think that's an important part of being a lawyer too, is you have to already preemptively think of what the opponent is going to come back at you with. So you have to like prepare for that. So I think that's what he was just trying to do for her.
Exactly. So they had always planned to split the oral argument time in when presenting the case. Marty was always going to handle the tax related aspects, while Ruth covered all the gender aspects of the case. Kind of funny though, when they show her secretary typing her briefing for this case, And that part where the secretary says, maybe you know what jumps out at me, the word sex. You say on the basis of sex, you say sex a lot. Maybe change it to gender because the judges may have a certain association with that word. And I guess that was actually true. She did ultimately change it to gender. And then yeah, so Melvin, he was the legal director for the ACLU at the time, and they say that he was kind of tantamount to her success in the case. The two, like you said, had the Jewish summer camp. They went to that, and that's where they met. So when Ruth told him about the case that her and Marty had found, he agreed that the ACLU would finance its litigation. So it wasn't really a back and forth too much like they show in the movie. They tried to keep it, pretty true to character, but out of all the characters in the movie, he's probably the greatest like victim of creative license when it came to writing the movie. He comes off as, skeptical about the need for women's rights movement and kind of like not too, what's the word, like reluctant, I guess, to take on the case that would advance women's rights. But in reality, he kind of was pretty much on it. He was ready to take it on pretty much at the onset of her bringing it up to him. He was said to be brash at times. He bragged that he would be the one to pluck her from obscurity and get the Rutgers law professor doing down and dirty women's rights work in front of the Supreme Court, as he later conceded maybe she plucked herself from obscurity. So he likes to take credit, but it's always a joke. After winning the case, she then went on to co-found the Women's Rights Project with the ACLU in 1972, where she continued to fight for gender equality. Emily Martin, the vice president for education and workplace justice at the National Women's Law Center, said that without Ginsburg's work eradicating the laws that discriminate on the basis of sex, the country may not look how it does today. A country, in spite of its problems, does have very few such laws that remain federally. It's definitely the case that as a result of the work that she had led, what it was really common in the laws no longer is. So it very much was like pretty much the catalyst to set everything in motion. But one one big thing that when I was looking at interviews with Ruth, because they had the screening for the movie where she was there, and Gloria Steinem was there, Hillary Clinton was there. So when she gets up there, she kind of, it takes her a second to like compose herself and really get going, which wasn't true at all. She said, "I didn't stumble." Like she didn't mess up. She was ready to go. So that was pretty much like dramatized for the movie, to kind of like set a mood for her to really go at him, as she does in the later half of the courtroom scene. So they did kind of portray her a little more timid in the beginning, because she's up there against I think there was three male judges, old dudes, old fogies. So, but yeah, she in every interview she says, she's like, nope, I didn't stumble, I was ready to go.
I mean, yeah, I think it would have been cool if they actually portrayed her as the strong individual that she was, just to show that obviously women can be very, confident in themselves.
In the end, the pair did win the case. The 10th Circuit decided that the tax code was invidious discrimination, marking the beginning of Ginsburg's mission to take down each and every law that discriminated on the basis of gender. So it pretty much, as she mentions to Marty, she realized that she can't, which also Melvin helped her realize in the mock trial that they held, is just like, Ruth, you can't take on everything with this one case. You really, like, as painful as it is, you really have to take it law by law, which he, ultimately was like, all right, I will do it if I have to.
So in because I know you said they changed it from sex to gender, and I guess
Mhm.
that just got me thinking, so like now is it written like you can't discriminate anyone based on their gender, or does it still say sex?
I mean, well, she meant that the secretary, when she brought it, she meant just that briefing.
Oh, okay.
So
Because I
I
was
don't,
thinking about it,
yeah.
because you know how like today, how like gender is like a big thing with people too. And so I'm like, I wonder if they are going to, in fact, have to do something similar to what Ruth did and now actually stipulate gender since,
Yeah.
people identify as different types of genders and so like that. So it's just,
Yeah, that'll just be a whole other
yeah, whole other battle.
yeah, which is pretty much what she was arguing is that, these things that you can't have it be set in stone. It very much needs to change with the times, which was something
Yeah.
that they just couldn't grasp at the time. That's just like it just everything needs to change. It needs to catch up pretty much. And I
Yeah.
mean that'll probably have to happen again, like you said, with sex and gender. It'll probably have to
That
happen
makes
again.
sense. Yeah. And I think that's also the problem with our laws today is that they're very like people don't want to change them, but it's like, dude, times are changing. You have to change with the times. Like you can't just be stuck in the freaking past. Like what applies now doesn't apply to how it was back then. Like back then, yeah, that made more sense. But now it's like things are different. We got to make new laws to reflect the society we're living in today.
I had this little note, this little funny fact at the end. I said eventually Harvard realized that it made a mistake in denying her that law degree because they show the whole part where she goes to the dean and is like, I need to be with my family, so I'm going to finish at Columbia. And she gives all these examples of other people that they allowed them to transfer and finish their degrees elsewhere, but her dean sucks and was like, nope, you're a woman. I'm not going to say that, but you're a woman and I don't care. So she did actually, leave and finish at Columbia. And so later Harvard was like, oh, well, we want to fix it and we want to give you your degree. And so she keeps refusing. She's like, no, you can't rewrite history. Nah, I don't need it. Thanks.
Damn. I didn't know she refused it. I knew the other part, but I didn't know she was refusing it. Damn.
Yep.
That's
Yeah.
what I liked to in the movie. There is that scene. I don't think it happened in real life, but where he's like, "I'm glad Harvard education is whatever." And she's like, "Oh no, I learned this at Columbia."
Yeah.
I was like,
yeah. She's like, no, I'm actually
"Damn."
practicing what I learned in Columbia. Yeah, exactly.
That's so funny. Just one thing I would want to say is just that I guess it's kind of cool that they the film kind of is pretty much exactly reflected on what actually happened in real life, and I
Yeah,
like
it's
that
pretty
they
true to life. Yeah.
yeah, I like that they were able to take real life and like pretty much do it, but do it in a way that's entertaining for people and easy for people to kind of understand. Because you
Exactly.
don't really see that very much. Like, yeah, things are based on real life, but they are just based, like they change a lot that actually happens. And I think that was one of our struggles in researching this is that we didn't find a lot of things that were that different from what happened in the film. But
Yeah.
I think that's also pretty cool.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, yeah, it definitely helps. And I really did enjoy that it was her nephew that wrote the movie. And both both her nephew and the director became very close with Ruth. I mean, I think they said that the nephew was like living with Ruth at the time, and Ruth brought the director into her home and showed her, everything about Marty and everything. So they really like, because I think he said that he was just she pretty much was just like, if you really want to learn what, was going on in my life, go to the Library of Congress. And she like assigned him like 900 books or something
Dang.
like that. And it's like, here you go, do your research on what was going on.
That's
So
cool.
he was doing like a lot of research like months prior before he even wrote the first draft. And she actually went over the first three drafts of the script. And then obviously she's a busy lady. So her daughter Jane took over reading the scripts as they came in, as each draft came in. So there was always like in the family, and they're
Yeah.
always trying to keep it true to life, which is really cool.
Yeah, and I also like that she was able to see the film that was about her life
Yeah,
and everything. So, because usually that doesn't happen until after they pass away, but I think it's pretty
yeah,
tight when they are able to do it while they're still here because of, like you said, they have some type of say in it and they can say what's actually happened and what didn't happen. And I think it's cool too. Like, I mean, I guess it's just kind of reiterating what I've said, but it's cool to show people where the history and like laws that affect us now have come from. And obviously law is kind of a very dense subject for people to understand and it's hard for people to understand. So I think making a film like this, it teaches people about law, but also in a way that's, easy to digest and you can see where your history kind of came from and why we're able to have some of the, luxuries in the sense of that we, can have now because it wasn't always so.
for sure.
And she was definitely a badass, like through and through. I didn't know that she had so many different types of cancer. I like read up on it and it said that she had like five. she was diagnosed with colon cancer, then pancreatic cancer, and then I think there was stuff in her lungs, and yeah, it's just.
And that's the thing too. I think I saw somewhere that they were saying even though she was going through all these illnesses, she always just showed up to work, never complained about anything, just kept doing what she was supposed to be doing. And that's
I think
really
she took like one day off
yeah, like
out
that's
of all of
crazy.
those, like all those times.
Well, even when her husband died, didn't the next day she like
Yeah.
went to somewhere to read something and she said because that's what Marty would have wanted. And I totally
Mhm.
agree. I think Marty would have been like, don't let this thing stop you from still, going at it in your career and whatnot. And also another little tidbit that I thought was kind of cool, even before this was like years ago. Was it years ago? Maybe a year ago. I saw a like little video online about her and her like exercise routine, and it was so cute.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I don't know if you guys saw too, like her personal trainer was at her funeral and he did like 3 push-ups, and it was because I think she said like she said really great things about him, and I think by the time she was like 80, she was able to do like 20 push-ups or something like that, and she like totally
Wow.
yes,
I'm
she
still
like
trying to do one without
I
on
know.
my knees.
But she
You
like
like
attributes that all to her personal trainer, and so when he did that, it's like
yeah, because wasn't he your personal trainer for like 20 years or
Yeah.
something crazy? Yeah.
Mhm. One last thing I want to say was like another thing that they didn't show or anything like that was her time in Sweden,
Mm-mm.
which is what really kind of showed her that a different lifestyle is completely possible, because I guess she was trying to learn like Swedish, or she did learn Swedish because she was like writing something for a Swedish author or something like that, and then she went to Sweden, and it was all about something not civil rights. What did she study? What did she teach again? Civil something, civil procedure. And so when she went to Sweden to see how they lived, she saw that like about 20 to 25% of students at their law school were women, and she saw how independent they were, how many of them were like working women, and how just how they worked and interacted together, and it was totally fine there. So it really that was a huge turning point for her too. And
Yeah.
if that didn't happen, I don't who knows if she would have been able to like view that as a possibility in her life.
Yeah. Also, too, sorry, one more thing.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was kind of cool too how we seen the film when when she was going to law school versus like when she was teaching law, right? At the little school she was at.
Yeah.
Okay. And I
The
kind of
little
thought
school.
well, I mean, it was tiny. I mean, like the class was really small is what I meant.
Okay.
I just thought it was cool seeing how her first when she was in class and there was only like her and a couple other ladies, but then when she was teaching it, there was multiple women and men in her class, and I just thought that's very interesting to see how in one lifetime such drastic change can happen. And
Right.
I don't know, it's just cool, but
Even
like
right
it's crazy.
now.
Yeah, like it's just kind of crazy how like in such a short amount of time so much change can happen, and it's almost like an inevitable that drastic change is going to happen in one lifetime. Because even my grandma talks about it all the time. She's like, I've seen so much in my one lifetime, like all even just like technology and all that stuff. She's like, it's kind of crazy like how much has changed from when she was young versus now. It's just
Yeah.
cool.
Which I agree with. Like, to me, what I feel like is the biggest thing that has changed is technology. And I always think about technology, but then like watching this, it's like, holy crap, the whole, sex and gender has really changed in a lifetime.
Yeah. Sorry. Okay. One more thing for real.
Okay.
I just keep remembering things that I liked about the movie. And like one of the things I really enjoyed too was that scene after they went to that lady. I forgot. What was her name?
Kenyon.
Yeah.
Dorothy Kenyon.
I was like, I know it started with a K or something. But just like the impact her daughter had on her and like pushing her to like kind of wanting to do this stuff too, because that when her daughter was kind of talking to those dudes and like standing up for herself, I was like, yeah, like whatever. Like, I don't know, just seeing it, I thought that was kind of also like a turning. Well, I mean, I don't think that really happened in real life, but just in the film, that was like a turning point for her. And then also when her daughter was like, okay, if you're not doing this for me, then like what is the fight for? Because basically you're fighting for the women my age now to, have these different opportunities. And I just thought that was cool because obviously you're going to do stuff for your kid to have a better life. And it's just cool to see that her able to change the world in such a way because, she wants her kid to, have opportunities.
Which really was like her final argument in the case too. It's just like you need to think about the kids, like it needs to change for our kids, like how how are you going to tell them no, pretty much
Yeah.
is like how are you not wanting them to succeed in anything they want to succeed in is pretty much what it came down to.
Yeah. And also too, I feel like this and our closing thoughts, we have a lot for some reason. But it was interesting to me too. I think she even says this in the film, how like protesting is obviously like that's what gets people's attention, but it's like the laws are what actually you have to change. So it's like you can't really have one without the other in a sense. Like you have to have people protesting in order to make change happen, but you also have to change the laws in order for that to have like a lasting impact on the world and the country and all that stuff. So I thought that was kind of cool that they kind of mentioned that in the film as well. And which kind of even like, today's current climate, how people are saying like protesting doesn't matter or anything like that, but it's like it does. It makes people wake up and see, hey, the world is changing. We need to make sure that these changes are reflected in our laws so that way, things like this don't have to continue. So I thought that was cool. Thought it should be mentioned right now.
Because it's like, if these, because this is, I think it was the 70s in the movie, because it's just like, well, if no one speaks out and says the thing is wrong, you just, like you said, you just need to bring it to people's attention. Otherwise, these people that are benefiting from it will continue to live that way.
Exactly. So, and they won't be complaining about it either.
Mm-mm.
So thanks for joining us this week on the Internet Historians. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to follow us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, as well as Google Podcasts, and give us a rating. We would also love to connect with you, so give us a follow on Instagram. We're also on YouTube, where you can see the live recording. Well, not live, but an edited recording of today's episode. And we also give sneak peeks into, I guess, the subjects that we talk about on Instagram, so you can see pictures of the various people that we talk about. Next week, we'll be discussing Titanic from the movie Titanic. So don't forget to tune in. Thanks again, and we will see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.